All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jacqueline Luna. I am the Adult Services Librarian here at the Coronado Library. And thank you for joining us today for our talk, Restoring Civility to Public Life Post-2020. This talk will be recorded as well and available to view after the fact. But I would like to thank Dr. Carl Luna for joining us today. Dr. Luna is the professor of political science at San Diego Mesa College and a visiting professor at the University of San Diego. He is the director of the Institute for Civil Civic Engagement and the co-chair of Restoring Respect, an initiative in its 9th year that promotes greater civility and San Diego's civic dialogue. He is well respected in the political science community and frequently appears as a nonpartisan analyst on a variety of programs, including Fox 5, KPBS, and the San Diego Union Tribune. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Luna.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to share a screen with you. And once that's up, and as I always have to do with my classes, I always like to confirm, are you seeing something that says "We the People"? Are we seeing the title slide?
Should be on there. You're all good to go.
All right. So we're going to talk today about how we can maybe try to improve civility in our public life after a tumultuous election, which is not over yet. As Jacqueline pointed out, I'm a professor at Mesa College, a visiting professor at USD. I also do a lot of commentary, and I'm particularly proud of one aspect of the commentary I do. I've done about 2,000 interviews for all kinds of different sources, but I've been a frequent analyst for 20 years plus at KPBS. But I've also been, for the last 7-8 years, the in-house resident political analyst for San Diego Fox 5. Now, Fox 5 is not Fox News, but its audience tends to break toward the conservative Fox News audience. And any polls on who wins presidential debates back in 2016, 2020, it was always Donald Trump by a large margin. KPBS breaks with a different audience. It's a much more liberal audience. If I can be doing for many years, both the KPBS audience and the Fox 5 audience, and be able to deliver a message, it tells me I'm able to stay at least reasonably in the fair and balanced nonpartisan arena. So I'm approaching all this from a nonpartisan perspective because first and foremost, we're all supposed to be Americans. Okay. Excuse me for just a moment. You look at one of the other things I do is I'm the director of the Institute for Civil Civic Engagement, as Jacqueline pointed out, and our mission is to try to, through events, through programs like this, through classes and education, try to create systems in which people can learn some of the tools and adopt attitudes to try to lead toward greater civility. Just last month in October, it was my honor to be able to interview Cindy McCain. She was our keynote speaker for our 9th annual conference, and that was actually carried on C-SPAN. And she was wonderful to interview, and she had a very strong message building on her husband, John McCain's message, the late senators, that we have to find common ground if we're going to maintain ourselves as a society. Yeah, what you need to know about civility is simple. Civility is about building community. As Malin Burnham, the local San Diego philanthropist, is famous for saying, multitudines coram se, from the Latin community before self. That is how communities form. Now, we didn't have a whole lot of that in the 2020 election. We are a very divided country. We were divided going into the election, and we're remaining divided coming out of the election. About 70 million on one side, 70 million on the other side, and there's not a lot of common ground in between. This has been a phenomenon that's really developed over the last 30 years. When I was a young political scientist back in the 1970s, 1980s, getting my degrees, we were always taught American politics functions under what's called the median voter theory. Everybody's in the middle, and so if you want to win, the two parties have to converge on the middle, and if that's the 50-yard line, you got to make it to the 45, 40-yard line of the other side to be able to win. We no longer have that single distribution of everybody in the middle. We basically have a dual hump distribution. A lot of people on the left center, a lot of people on the right center, not a lot in the middle. And it's affecting the way we see each other in a way politics really didn't up through the 1970s, 1980s. You look at, you ask Republicans and Democrats how they feel about the other party. Large numbers of Republicans and Democrats, pluralities of both, would be more upset if their kid married somebody from the other party than somebody from another race or religion. That's a great difference. Democrats and Republicans now see each other, pluralities in the parties, see each other as being a great threat to the nation's well-being. If you believe the other side is a threat to an existential threat to the country, there is no ground or room for coalition building. There is no room for compromise. It becomes a war of all against all. And that's not how democracies either are supposed to work or survive. We seem to be living in two different worlds in terms of values and sometimes even facts. Trump voters tend to focus on the economy more than Biden voters on healthcare. The coronavirus outbreak, overwhelmingly, Biden voters thought it was a thing, Trump voters not. How the current third wave is going to affect people's attitudes, we'll have to see. And we're seeing just increased polarization across issues. Though when you drill down, there's still a lot of common ground that doesn't get reflected in this. Things like abortion. About 58% of Americans think abortion should be safe and legal, about 58% and limited. 58% think that guns should be owned by individuals with some limitations. 58% think the environment is an issue that needs to be approached. How you do it becomes the issue. Uh, but now the idea, say the result in lasting harm to the country, you've got 89% of Trump supporters and 90% of Biden supporters thinking the other person is going to be a lasting harm to the country. We haven't seen that sort of polarization since the election of 1860. And it breaks down by gender. Men are increasingly voting Republican, women are voting increasingly Democrat. The Republican Party wins consistently high, 3-2 with whites. The Democrats win stronger with non-whites. It's not good to be polarized by race. It's not good to be polarized by gender. It's not good to be polarized by religion. Republicans overwhelmingly win the religious vote. Democrats win the secular vote. Once you believe that your side has God and nation on it, then you don't compromise with the other. Once you believe that your side stands for science and facts and the other side is a bunch of hicks and rubes, you don't end up finding compromise. And you've seen that in the ideological divide between between the parties. Back in the Clinton years, for all the animosity that we had back in the Clinton years, the impeachment and all the rest, you still had a general center. Bill Clinton could reach to the center, and in '96, he won re-election by getting farther to the center than Bob Dole could do. 2004, there was still a lot in the center that had moved. By 2015, you have parallel universes going on. Oh, and it got worse by 2017. The median Republican voter and the median Democratic voter have the highest gap between them than at any point that has been measured in modern American politics. A lot of political scientists and historians say we're about as divided as we were during Reconstruction. And you see it in the way we have organized ourselves, where we live, and how we vote. That is our voting map for the last 20, 25 years. You take a look at the United States from space. If it glows in the dark, it votes votes Democrat. Urban areas, the cities, have broken consistently Democratic across states. Doesn't matter if it's a red or a blue state. If it's an urban area, it votes Democrat. The rural areas overwhelmingly been voting Republican. So if it's dark at night, it votes Republican. The battleground since the 70s and 80s has been the suburbs. Ronald Reagan established Republican dominance for a generation by winning the suburbs coming out of the 70s and 80s. The Democrats in the teens are winning them back. And in 2020, the suburban vote was pivotal to the Biden win, though for local gerrymandering for House races, for local legislative races, that impact is watered down. The Republican Party is no longer just a Southern party or a rural Western party. It is a rural party to a exurban party. We've never had politics like that, where you have within states that much fracturing. Look at Georgia. Georgia flipped to the Democrats in the 2020 race. Secretary of State certified it this morning. Georgia, 57% of the vote comes out of Atlanta. Now, that's what drove that. Meanwhile, the rural counties went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. Georgia has a higher college graduation rate in Atlanta, metro Atlanta, than Wisconsin or Michigan have per capita. Very different worlds, the cities and the rural areas. And then you see that sort of geographic balkanization. You got a lot of red, but as a smaller population, smaller areas of blue, but that's where more of the cities tend to be in the towns. It was more polarized this time than in the 2012 election with Romney versus Obama. And then I look back to the Jerry Ford, Jimmy Carter days, when you had that sort of a reach, far more swapping back and forth, split ticket voting, more willingness to vote for the other party. That doesn't occur nearly as much today. Now, so you look at the 2020 election outcome, the big cities, small geography, a lot of population, lots of little small red dots that then collectively put up just 5 million less votes than the cities did. Oh, that map indicates how people moved from the 2016 election. The blue areas moved profoundly more toward the blue. The red areas have moved profoundly more toward the red. The polarization intensified in this election. What we got going is something of a uncivil war. Thankfully, it is a war of words, a war of ideas. It's a war of emotions, but Americans just don't get along as much in political theory. In person, they still get along pretty darn good. But in practice, this is becoming more detrimental to reaching decisions, and this becomes a problem. If you have parties that are that polarized, if you compromise either side, you don't win re-election. So for 5 election cycles, we have been electing Congresses that if they try to get anything done, they get blasted from the left or the right for being too compromising, so they don't get anything done. People get mad because government can't get anything done, so they start to blame others. It is a negative cycle. Now, will lead to violence or acts of terror, though. This is the real concern. It could get worse. Over the last 3-4 weeks, we have put together through our institute and others about 20, 30 organizations that are just kind of on standby to pool resources. And this includes nonprofits, it includes law enforcement, it includes city and district attorney offices, just to be able to share information about how we can react should you get disruption that leads to violence in San Diego, to try to keep things tapped down so people can peacefully and effectively protest if they want to, but you don't get violence. As soon as you do, it becomes a whole different game. Most Americans have been very concerned that we can end up with violence in politics in recent years. Most Americans think it's important, according to polls, that you treat each other with civility. You attempt to compromise. Mitch McConnell talked about how we need to appeal for civility, particularly going into the post-election period. We need debate without acting up. But there's been pushback, both on the left and the right. Somehow civility has been associated with the left by the right as meaning basically shut up. Don't say things we don't want to hear. Politically correct is civility, and it shuts down conversation. Or on the right, civility is seen as don't criticize us. Any criticism is being uncivil. So the left seems to own civility. The right, meanwhile, has taken over patriotism. Notice how the political campaign for Republicans always has the flag involved. That's dangerous when one party tends to want to see itself as the patriotic party and the other party, the unpatriotic. It's dangerous when one party sees itself the civil party and the other party, the uncivil party, because both break down compromise. I swear the most dangerous words I've heard in modern times in American politics was politicians who say, it's good to talk to real Americans when they're talking to their base. If only your base are real Americans, you don't have any reason to reach out to the other side. They're now the enemy to be defeated. Excuse me, I sometimes go the wrong way. Part of the issue regarding civility is it's one of those words like socialism we use without fully understanding its meaning. Oh, people talk about somebody being a socialist. A socialist is somebody who believes that government should own the means of production, own the factory, the farms, the fields. If they're not advocating that, they're not a socialist. Who says that? Every dictionary, political scientist, and economists. You don't have to use those definitions. You can call whatever you want a socialist, but if you call a armadillo an avocado and try to make guacamole out of it, it's not going to taste so good. Oh, it's like fascism. People call people they don't like fascists. Unless you're advocating an ultra form of nationalism to exterminate other races, you're not a fascist. Now, there are real socialists and fascists in American politics. They are a very small fringe. So words matter. And civility, we use the word, we don't always use it correctly. We tend to think of it as being civil behavior, as not being rude to others, not disrupting things, not being a bully. Civility is so much more than simply being polite to each other. Please remember that the southern states, prior to the Civil War, the antebellum South, had a reputation for genteel civility, which masked the horrors of slavery. It is not civil if it is stifling conversation to make society better. Holding your tongue to allow injustices to occur is not civil. Civility is speaking truth to power for the common good. Now, to understand what civility is, well, we got to talk about what politics is first. Politics, what I teach, comes from the Greek, the root word, the poly, the many. For the Greeks, you begin with the many, all of us as individuals, and you slap an S on the end of that, and you're now into the polis, the community. You have brought together the community of all. Yeah, that's what the polis is about. Community is taking all of us together. Politics, X is a transformative I'll get it out yet. A transformative word in the Greek. It means suffix, it means a process. And politics for the Greeks was the process of turning the many into the community, turning the poly into the polis. It's the process by which we become the community that can work cooperatively together. Keep going the wrong way, apologies. Civility is based right on this. It's basically the Latin version of the polis and politics. The cives was the citizens of Rome, and the civitas, the city, is the community of the cives. You bring together the individuals into the community. And civility is the process which builds community. Anything that brings us together into broader communities, more effective communities that benefit more people, is civil. Now, this is such an important concept, we emblazed it on our coins. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. We come together as individuals to work toward a cooperative good. Oh, Thanksgiving is coming, the big occasion of family. Hopefully you all have a safe Thanksgiving, a well-distanced Thanksgiving, and we don't spread any COVID with the cranberry sauce. We don't want over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house to go to give her a mortal disease. But that's basically, though, Thanksgiving represents what civility is all about. It's Ohana. I don't know if you saw the movie Lilo and Stitch, the Disney film. I always tear up every time that little blue space alien learns what Ohana means, that it means family. No one is left behind or forgotten. That's what our Constitution means. It means family. There is no I in we the people. We form our more perfect union to protect our individual rights, understanding that outside of all of us working together, my rights are only what I can defend with a club. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine too, if I can take it from you. And eventually there'll be somebody more powerful than me in the state of nature. We must be in a community to protect all of our rights. Property doesn't exist outside of the social contract, and community beyond what I can defend with a club. People sometimes make the mistake of thinking they can bring a checkbook to a knife fight. You show up against somebody who's got a club or a knife with just your money, they're just going to take it from you. Thugocracy reigns. Oh, we see that with Putin in Russia. We see that with Xi Jinping in China. Kleptocratic authoritarian states. Our Constitution was supposed to be all about how our union, all of us working together for the common good, can advance the general welfare and promote the blessings of liberty. So if you want to know what civility is whatever builds community, what brings us together. And as we build communities and integrate them, we build civilization. Civility is the glue by which civilizations develop. We can share values and ideas and work together cooperatively. Incivility is the opposite. That which divides us, tears us apart. That which doesn't find ways for us to work together is by definition uncivil. It is tearing apart the community. That was a great example of tearing apart the community with a cost of close to 1 million dead all told. Incivility, we fight each other. Oh, and ultimately, incivility breaks down communities and destroys civilizations. Yeah, there's a lot on the line from incivility. If we have raging incivility, communities break down, democracy breaks down. Central to the theory of democracy in our country, really the republic idea, is you got this social contract, and the social contract's simple. You've got rights and I've got rights: life, liberty, happiness, pursuit of property. If we agree to respect each other's rights, and if we have a disagreement, we pick a neutral third party, government, to now adjudicate our concerns, and now we will abide by that decision under the theory that over time, everybody wins. Democracy is based on the Oprah Winfrey school of thought. You get liberty and you get liberty and you get liberty. But it means we must compromise, and nobody wins all the time. If somebody's always winning and somebody else is always losing, you have an authoritarian system. You are into monopolies of power. Yeah. And this is a serious concern because political scientists will tell you democracy is not doing well globally in 2020 or here at home. There are some fears that the 2020 election and all the politics associated with it in the 2020s could lead to an undoing of American democracy. Now, this is not a new debate. It's been going on all across the teens, and it far predates either President Trump, even President Obama. There's been a growing assault on democracy around the world for a basic reason. Our democracies are not doing very well with dealing with the rapid change that's going on as we move from industrial economies to post-industrial economies. We're leaving a lot of people behind. Look at the people in the Rust Belt, people my age who went to college, high school the same year as I did back in the 70s, but then they went to work in the factory their fathers and grandfathers worked at, only to find that factory closed by the 80s, either shipped offshore, or more likely, more of these jobs were lost to simple automation, to robots, to more advanced technological means of production. And then we didn't do anything for them as a society to help a 55-year-old unemployed steel worker or a coal mine worker find a better job. It's not a coincidence that opioid addiction has raced through those communities with the same virulent detrimental impact as crack cocaine did in African American communities in the 80s when they saw deindustrialization first hit them. Well, you've got a problem if you're an elected official today. You don't know what the answer is. There's this saying in law, when the facts are on your side, argue the facts. If the facts aren't on your side, argue the law. If neither the facts or law are on your side, pound the table. Be angry. And that's what our politicians lacking real solutions have been doing. They blame the other side. And political scientists look at that, not just here, but in Europe, in the Middle East, around the world, and we see disturbing signs. The Economist magazine does a democracy index. For the last decade, you've seen democracy declining everywhere in the world. The United States has seen its democratic standing erode. From 2015 on, we've been considered a flawed democracy. There are about 20 full democracies where one man, one vote really works, where rights are protected, where money has a limited, if any, role in politics, and where individuals have equality in picking their government. Excessive wealth inequality, which is bad for capitalism, by the way. It's not a moral issue. If too few people have too much money, when they bet right, we get a boom. When they bet wrong, we get a big bust. Both Karl Marx and Adam Smith argued against the monopoly tendency. Marx hoped the monopoly tendency would destroy capitalism. Smith warned if government doesn't contain that monopoly tendency of wealth concentration, it will destroy capitalism. You need free and fair marketplaces. We seem to have less of that. All of that has conspired to drop us into the second tier of democracies. We don't want to drop below that because if you do, you're in an illiberal state, an authoritarian state. We are closer to it than we have been any time in the last 75, 80 years since the Great Depression almost radicalized American politics. So you get lots of this. Foreign affairs, I did a cover a couple of years ago. Is democracy dying? Centralization of power, all these effects. As a Latin American friend put it ruefully, we've seen this movie, just never in English. That article went on to say, some say that the global democracy has experienced its worst setback since the 30s and will continue to retreat unless rich countries find ways to reduce inequality and manage the information revolution. Those are the optimists. Pessimists fear the game is already over. Democratic dominance has ended for good. If that is the case, we're in serious trouble. I'm more the optimist, but I understand that we are in the worst crisis of democracy globally since the 1930s. Turkey, in the most recent iteration, has now been seen for 2020 as an unfree state. Eastern Europe is becoming flawed or illiberal regimes. Latin America is seeing a resurgence of this. Demagogues take the place of real politicians. So there's a question, can democracy survive? And incivility fuels the decline of democracy because now people aren't willing to compromise. And then you get stuff like this. A significant minority of Americans now say they'd support a military coup if their side isn't in charge of the government. This is how democracies die if you're not careful. So what do you do to restore civility? First off, you're not going to until you get through the inauguration in January and months to follow after that, until you settle into some new rhythm and normality, either from a second Trump administration, which is extraordinarily unlikely. By any reasonable measure, the president lost the election. Georgia again certified the results. There is no historical precedent for this election to be changed at this point, and there's no historical precedent for the amount of fraud that has been alleged in modern times for this outcome. It is what it is, but you need to get to a period where people accept that, and only then can you start rebuilding civility on a large scale. It's kind of like right now. It's the couple that's in the fight throwing the crockery and pots at each other. Until they exhaust themselves from that, you're not going to be able to get them into counseling to try to bring them back together. So we got to get through a couple of tough months until the inauguration, hoping that there's not major civil unrest around the country. Yeah, that could change things dramatically. Hopefully, with Thanksgiving, Christmas, the New Year's, we get into January and we're all too tired out and COVID keeping us indoors for this to happen, and we make it by almost default through the inauguration. Cindy McCain in our conference in October was saying, until you can get the nation to come together, it's on us as individuals to start building it, to put aside our political grievances and start trying to find things to talk about with each other. One of the first things she was mentioning you got to do is stop demonizing the other side. You can have people you disagree with, but you don't demonize. We got to remember the thumper rule. It's simple as that. If you can't say something nice, or at least if you can't say something that's not absolutely rancid, don't say it at all. Now, we need to all be better monitors of what we say, so we don't take the cheap thrill of saying something really negative about the other side just for the short feel good. Remember that old idea, treat others the way you want to be treated? You can disagree with people, but you don't want people to abuse you for your ideas. Don't abuse them. Always assume at least a commitment from the other side to the basic rule of law and social contract, until rules, until evidence itself to the contrary is presented. The Proud Boys, the Boogaloos, the people who marched in Charlottesville, the neo-Nazis, you don't have to compromise with Nazis. They are beyond compromise. You need to marginalize them and remove them from the political system. Republicans aren't Nazis. There are those on the far left. People talk about Antifa, but it's even farther left than Antifa, who would like to see a communist revolution. You don't try to negotiate with them. You push them out of the public space, and then you engage in a better conversation within it. Oh, social media may well be the lead in the water of our civilization, from ancient Rome's reference. Social media has had its upsides, but it's got a lot of downsides. One of the things you want to do is monitor your own social media habits. Don't be the one on there flaming other people for the cheap thrill and the ego satisfaction of the whole thing. Yeah, anonymity on social media is the real enemy. Years ago, I was driving to Mesa College one day for class, and a guy cut me off on the freeway. He cut across 4 lanes just before Mesa College Drive and got in front of me to get off. He'd forgotten to get over to get off to Mesa College Drive. So I laid on the horn. He gave me the single finger to salute in the mirror, and that's how we went up the hill and through the light and made a left, heading down toward Kearney. Horn finger, horn finger. Then we're heading to the light at the bottom of the hill, and I'm thinking, please don't turn red, please don't turn red, because the last thing you want to do is to be behind that person stopped at the intersection. Light stayed green. We went through it. We drove together all the way to Mesa College. He turned in, I turned in. Then he turned left toward the faculty lot. I followed faculty. He must have thought I was a stalker at that point with road rage. We pulled into the faculty lot, pulled up near each other, got out. We knew each other. Not well, we weren't great friends, but we were colleagues. And we both immediately did the old, oh, I am so sorry. No, it was totally my fault. You will treat strangers far differently than you treat people you know. You've all heard the expression, don't worry what they think, we'll never see them again. The internet's anonymity breeds such dissociative behaviors. So a golden rule of social media, never post anything you wouldn't say to the person face to face. Yeah, don't post anything you don't want your kids to read. Don't post anything you wouldn't say in front of your mother. Rein yourself in with social media. There's far better ways to spend your time than burning people on the internet. Now, debate is good. This is how democracies work. We share ideas. And then the ideas that prove themselves with facts over time, we should all adopt. Yeah, but you don't demonize. The other side is not your enemy. Think of Coronado in this last election cycle. I saw more lawn signs, more banners than I've ever seen before. And they were for both parties. And indeed, Coronado in this election kind of tipped. It went bluer than it had before. It was a little, it was on the blue side as opposed to the red. I will bet many of you walking around saw signs on properties that said, gee, I never knew they were on that side of the party. What did it matter? If it didn't affect your relationship with them before that or your opinion of them, why should it afterwards? It's just political ideas that we can try to work on to try to find common ground. As soon as you demonize, real debate is over, and now you're into destruction. Now, you got to be a critical thinker too. Now, problem solving, you take in information, you weigh it, then you act on it. If it results in a good thing, you do it again. If it's a bad thing, you don't. This is simple cause and effect that we are supposed to recognize. Yeah, one of the first things to do to be a good critical thinker, get lots of different information. Don't just look at one news source. And here's a rule of thumb. If the news you are looking at always makes you feel good because it tells you exactly what you want to hear, look at something else. You are not getting the full picture of the world. I listen to PBS, I listen to Fox, I listen to MSNBC, I read Wall Street Journal, New York Times, I listen to AM talk radio, though that tends to take a little bit harder time for me to listen to, and I can't do it for long because it is so factually incorrect much of the time. I'm not saying that from a partisan perspective. There are simple measures we use for fact. Again, take the notion of the epidemiology. When overwhelmingly science says it's this way, they might be wrong. That's how science works. There's a small percentage of the time they might be wrong. Then they have to adapt their models to it. But if you're on the north rim of the Grand Canyon looking south and you say, I don't believe in gravity and step out, you're going to fall. Notice that all the places where people were saying COVID's not a thing now have the worst mortality rates in the country. That basic issue. Facts win out in the end, but if you ignore them in the short term, it causes you problems. But don't just look at liberal or conservative media, look at it all. And then keep calm and talk to people. Talk to the people around you. Try to find conversations you can have about things which don't have to do with politics. Focus on what you can agree on. Focus on local issues you want to solve. Focus on how you can help each other through this COVID epidemic and what we do afterwards to be sure it never happens again. You can be a coach on a little league team with somebody who has nothing to do with you politically and still build community. Those are all the things which are more important. Really, only 40% of Americans pay a lot of attention to politics day in and day out. The other 60% are just trying to get through their lives. For the 40% who are involved, we can't keep on making it an our side or nothing proposition. Yeah, so you build community a conversation at a time, conversations like this one, conversations held through the Coronado Public Library, conversations held through the various community groups you belong to. Get into good conversations. Don't just be on social media exchanges where people are venting. Be in conversations that are there to build a sense of community, not tear it down. Remember, ultimately, civility means community before self. We the people does not mean I first. It is only by collectively working together we can protect ourselves and our individual rights. Baby boomers, meanwhile, you can skip the Fifth American Covenant. I thought I'd cut that out. We baby boomers haven't done a particularly good job of doing this. I'm a little bit disappointed in my generation. We went to Woodstock and we came out more conservative, more focused on ourselves, the me generation than the previous generation. We became the generation of Ayn Rand, the generation of the geckos, the greed is good. This is not what community is about. It's not about me, it's about us. And by looking for us, the me gets taken care of. And that's how you end up with stuff like this. The mask is a symbol of tyranny. No, it's not. It's a simple medical precaution that's been taken forever. Do you really think your doctors all these years were being put into slavery to wear masks when they're in the operating room? How many of you would have ever gone into an operating room and looked at your doctor who's just sitting there without a mask on, coughing, getting ready to cut into you? You would have gone, put a mask on. You understand it for everyone. You need to apply it to yourself as well. But that myopic me focus of my generation hasn't done the next generation, millennials, a solid. They need to do better in the Gen Zers than us. We've got to think beyond ourselves. Dream hoarders has been an issue. We have a meritocracy, but it tends to be self-replicating. About 25% of the population, the American upper middle class and above, has been doing quite good the last 30, 40, 50 years. Coronado falls into that category. Notice there's not really a low-income housing area in Coronado. We have our kids, and what do we want to do? We want them to be able to live as well as we do. So you go to Coronado High, you have a better chance to get into a good school, get a good job. Then maybe one day come back to live in Coronado, except notice, most of us living here have kids who are never going to be able to afford to buy here. We're taking their dream away because of the cost that has gone up. Around the country, the top 20% has tended to pull the ladder up after itself. Zoning laws have been a major issue. The simple fact you've got good and bad neighborhoods in town still tell you got problems. Every neighborhood's supposed to be good if it's Ohana. You don't look at your kids and say, well, I got 4 kids, 3 are doing great, 1's doing terrible, it's a good day. Unless the rising tide's lifting all boats, the system's not working. So that's the ultimate goal. If you want to restore civility, we got to start finding ways to work together to put the we first. And it's going to take us years to get back to that. We're going to have to probably go through another really vicious election cycle before we finally establish some sort of a national consensus of how to move forward. But until then, we can try to build civility in our own lives, remembering that it's all about Ohana, it's all about family. And on that note, I'm going to end the slideshow. I'm going to stop the share. And I'm available for any questions you got. If you want to unmask, if you want to undo your video, put on your video, unmute, ask a question, I'm going to answer what you got for as long as you want.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Luna. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop our recording here. And